Hi, so I'm Professor Himanshu Kumar and I work in Indian Institute of Science Education and Research Bhopal, and my work focus on infectious diseases. So we mainly work with various kind of RNA viruses. We do work with some DNA viruses, and I teach immunology as a main subject, and besides this I also talk some part of viral immunology, and we basically work on various aspect of antiviral mechanism which is existing in our body. So I'm going to talk about this whole course. You can see the name, it's a host pathogen interaction and immunology. So in this course we will first study various aspects of immunology, basic immunology, which is very much needed in order to learn the host pathogen interaction. In fact, I will take you in quite great detail about various topics in immunology, and broadly we will study the various aspects of immunology, which includes, we will talk about some unique properties of immunology. We will take up various immune organ, immune cells, and the mediators which is integrating the immunity, and then we will categorically study the natural immunity, which also we call it as a innate immunity, and then we will study adaptive immunity, and after this we will take the various topic like host pathogen interaction, like virus and host interaction, and we will take some model viruses which is quite common, and we will study in great detail about those virus and viral diseases. We will look at a lot of molecular aspects, and then we will take some bacterial diseases, we will take few parasite diseases, and in that way we will finish the course. I hope you will enjoy this journey with me, and you will learn a lot about your own defense system, which is very important, not only for or against infectious diseases, but it is playing very important role in our all those diseases which is caused by some or other problem in our body, okay, intrinsic problems, okay. So let's begin with history of immunology, and history of immunology is it has a very long history, and if you are interested in history, probably you may know that there was in past there was various plagues, okay, and few plagues are very well known which cause massive death around the world. And now I think you are the best person who can understand the meaning of pandemic, in which we are still going on, right? So this pandemic, the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic that affected whole world, right? Many people died, but we should thank the immunologist or virologist who has created the vaccine in quite short time, and we all get vaccinated and we all are protected against this virus. A quite good amount of protection we have. But generally this vaccine discovery and vaccine creation and vaccine administration, this takes a decade time, but due to the knowledge of science we are able to do it. You will see all these things in my today's session, that how the vaccine and immunology both get evolved, okay. So let's begin. So there is one historian, his name is Pseudasius, and he basically gave this kind of a observation or concept, okay, and he was a person who basically tell that there is some kind of defense. As you can see in this slide, the discipline of immunology grew out of the observation that individuals who had recovered from certain infectious diseases were thereafter protected from the disease. Okay, so overall the concept is that in past also there was outbreaks, and these outbreaks were quite dangerous, and when these outbreaks happen, then some people survive from these outbreaks. Okay, and all those individuals who survived from this outbreak, whatever infection is there, so they develop some kind of protection, and at least when they get next time infected, it was not so fatal, at least it's not taking their life. So that concept was, or that observation was made, and this observation we call it as a immunology or immunity. There is a word immunity. Okay, basically the immunity word is a Latin word, and it is a Latin word immunis, and the meaning is exempt. Okay, so from there this immunology word basically kind of started. Okay, immunology is basically studying the defense system. Okay, so from where it all began, it is basically began quite early. If you see this slide, there was a huge pandemic. At that time people used to call it as a plague. Okay, there are several kinds of plague. Okay, plague is a one kind of situation or symptom or disease which is taking the life of individual. Okay, so this was started with smallpox disease. In Hindi we call it as a chechak, right, and it is also known as variola. So the evidences for this disease, it is lying in the faces of mummies which is buried between 1570 to 1085 BCE. So at that time there was a massive death about from this smallpox. About 4 lakh lives per year was lost in Europe. Okay, so I will tell more detail or more history of this smallpox and how we overcome the smallpox. But before that, just I want to give a glimpse about the smallpox disease in light of current knowledge. Okay, and just a little information so that you will develop an interest, and then you will go through the history. Okay, so smallpox is a disease which is here you can see that it's thousands of years ago this disease was started, and the virus emerged and beginning cause illness and death in human population. So it was emerged and it caused so many death. Okay, this virus in current scenario you can understand these words. This virus has a linear double stranded DNA genome. It's a DNA virus. Okay, and that the size of genome varies from 130 to 230 kilobase pair. Okay, and this virus cause it's a highly infectious virus. We call it as a contagious. Okay, And this virus basically cause variety of symptoms such as high fever, head and body pain. Sometimes it cause vomiting, and in worst scenario this cause disfigurement. Okay, and here you can see this is the virus which is, this is electron micrograph of smallpox virus. So when this virus infect, the incubation time, means at the time of infection to the development of first symptom, it basically varies from individual to individual, and in general it is 10 to 20 days, it depends on the individual. Okay, the first symptom will appear maybe after 10 days or maybe around 15 to 20 days. Okay, and after that after 20 days, say after 4 days, here 4 days means 24th day, the skin sores will appear on the skin, and these sores will be filled with thick opaque fluid and often have a dent in center. Okay, and by day 6, I mean 26th day of this rash, the sores become a pustule. You can see there is a big pustules. In Hindi we can understand like a fafola. Okay, and then this the symptom will go very deep and very complicated, and then by end of second week means after 14 days, I mean around 20 plus 14, after 34 days, the rash appear, and most of the sores have scab over. Okay, so they will, this pustule will dry up or it will come out. Okay, and this smallpox, of course it is affecting various important organ. Beside this make the skin very bad. If you Google the images for a smallpox patient, okay, so then you can find out that there is a it makes the skin very bad, and it mainly affect face, hand and other parts of body. Okay, but the main target is hand and face. Okay, and once the individual is having this smallpox, his or her face will be look very not so good. Okay, so this is just a brief introduction about the smallpox disease. Now we will move on how this smallpox disease was there, but how this there was a beginning of the end of smallpox. So this was initiated by Al-Razi. Please note that before this, his concept, before the concept of Al-Razi, the people were thinking that this is a some kind of curse from the god. Okay, those who are developing this disease, and then it is spreading like anything, because it's a highly contagious. So it is basically a god wishes or a god curse to the people, because there must be something wrong, and people were not thinking about other than this. So after the work of Al-Razi, okay, the people, he is basically a Persian physician, and first explained the smallpox and measles as a disease. It is a disease, it's not some kind of curse. Okay, he also explained about the allergy for first ever time, and he was about smallpox. He said that smallpox appears when blood boils. So try to understand, they don't have any scientific information. So in that scenario, he at least gave that, okay, this is a disease caused by something, not by curse of God. So in a very simpler word, he explained smallpox. Smallpox appears when blood boils, and is infected, resulting in vapor being expelled. Thus, juvenile blood is being transformed into richer blood, having the color of mature wine. Okay. At this stage, smallpox show up especially as a bubbles. So you have noted in my previous slide, when there is a smallpox, then there will be a big pustules. So that what he explained, showed up essentially as bubbles found in wine, the blisters or the pustules. This disease can also occur at other times, meaning not only during childhood, means throughout their life. The best thing to do during this first stage is to keep away from it. Means now we have a one term known as quarantine. Okay. So otherwise this disease might turn into the epidemic. So he gave some idea at least how to protect from this disease. So practice followed to prevent this smallpox. So by that time, when this disease was quite dominant, at that time people have learned something about this disease by observation, and this was also observed in India. So in India, inoculation was performed by dipping a sharp iron needle into a smallpox pustule. So they understood that if you take out this pathogen or this at that time pathogen or virus word was not there. If you take this pustule fluid or material and if you inoculate in some in healthy individual, then that individual may be protected from the smallpox. Okay. So in India also there was some practice. Okay. So this smallpox pustule and then punctured the skin repeatedly in a small circle. So they basically take and then they make a they transfer this or they inoculate, okay, in upper arm, and this practice was documented in Bengal as a ritual to worship the goddess Shitala Mata, and this was mainly performed by Tikadhars. Okay, so they are they are kind of a specialized person, or maybe they are priest, because the god thing is also there. So there are some priest who is doing this thing, and the result was that many kids or many people, they are protected from the smallpox. Okay, so there was a one kind of practice. If the baby or the individual will develop a mild fever after doing this procedure, then they used to say that, okay, Mata Shitla blessed that individual and now he or she will be protected from smallpox. Okay. There was also similar kind of thing going on in China, and in China also there was some practice of inoculation. So what they used to do it, they make a powder from this pustule and then they basically transfer into the nose, okay, or they take this pustule in cotton and put it in the nose. Okay, so these were the practice in order to protect from the smallpox. Okay, this, since this was in whole world, so people around the world is means they were quite suffering and people are dying. So this concept came, this variolation. So variolation is nothing, it's a just inoculation of these pustule from diseased individual to the healthy individual in order to protect the healthy individual from this disease, smallpox. Okay. So there is a little story here I will just narrate for you, because so at that time there was so many death. Okay, and one person, her name is Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. She or her family was died by smallpox. Her brother was also died in smallpox. Then she decided something that she will try to control this disease. Okay, and then at that time there was a Ottoman Empire. Okay, and this Ottoman Empire is quite powerful if you see the history. Okay, then this lady Mary Wortley, she got married with one person in that empire. It is basically in Istanbul. Okay, and then because in Istanbul this practice was there, inoculation practice was there, like giving it in nose, putting under the skin by making a small cut. But there was some serious problem with this inoculation. The serious problem is that many people, or not many, occasionally some people, they die by this inoculation. Try to understand, at that time dose and amount or route was not defined. That's why in some individual, when they receive more inoculation, then they die. Okay, so in order to overcome, so she was aware that okay, in Istanbul this kind of thing is there and many people get protected, but some people get infected and die by this kind of inoculation. So what she did, she hired since she got married with a quite big person, then she had all power. So she assigned some surgeon. Here you can see there are two surgeon, royal surgeon, they call it as a royal surgeon, and these royal surgeons in this image you can see that there are some surgeons over there. Okay, so she hired and then she said to study this thing. Okay, and standardize this inoculation and amount. Okay, and route. Then you will be little this thing that puzzled that how they perform this experiment. Okay, so basically at that time there was a prisoners. Okay, so at that time they don't use animal, they directly use human. So she basically assigned 6 prisoners, and on those prisoners they made an experiment. They standardized various things, and then eventually those prisoners were protected from the smallpox. Then she at that time she had a son, and her son got inoculated, and later on her daughter also got inoculated in presence of royal surgeons. Okay, so in that way this variolation thing came, and this variolation is later on you have seen that it moved to India, China and various countries, and the people got protected. So if you see all this thing, it took so many years. Okay, but if you compare with current scenario, then you can understand that in current scenario we made a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine quite fast, or I will say extremely fast, and we got protected. Okay, so after that there was a lot of work, and then there was a this vaccine came in 1798, and you know this this name is very much familiar to you, probably the name of Edward Jenner. Okay, so Edward Jenner, he observed that the person who is providing milk to his family, okay, that person has some pustules. Okay, and this pustule basically, and that person is basically protected from the smallpox. Okay, so this observation result to the discovery of now we call it as a vaccinia virus or cowpox virus. Okay, and he also investigated this phenomena or this observation, and finally he performed a very simple experiment, not experiment, it's a real trial you can say, to his gardener's boy, and the name of boy is James Phillips. Okay, so he just inoculated this cowpox pustules to that kid. Okay, and then later on he infected with smallpox. And very interestingly, and it's a huge news. Still, we take this news as a huge news. The kid was protected from this smallpox. So this was a one of very big discovery at that time. Okay, and we still use this vaccinia virus in order to protect from the smallpox. Okay, and you may aware that in 1979 or 1977 it was declared that smallpox is disappeared from the globe. Okay, so this is his observation, but please remember this Edward Jenner's work was also practiced earlier, but it was not reported. Okay, some farmer used to do this kind of practice. They take the pustules and put it in the individual. It's a something like a layman kind of thing. Okay, and they get protected from the smallpox. But the documentation and observation and presenting to the world is mainly started by the Edward Jenner. And you may be very much surprised that at that time by this work he received 30,000 pounds at that time, 1798. It's a huge money at that time. In order to continue his work, plus in order to spread this his success. Okay, and he become a member of all big society and all those things. So this was the Edward Jenner's work. So later on, the first modern control experiment in immunology was started in 1880s by Louis Pasteur. So you know the Louis Pasteur, probably you may remember Louis Pasteur made various kind of work, and he made one very interesting observation. He worked he was working with chicken, and he used the one bacteria which caused diarrhea in the chicken, that is chicken cholera bacillus. Okay, and this chicken cholera bacillus is basically, when they infect the chicken, they cause the diarrhea. So what he was doing, he was before going to the vacation in summer, he forgot to keep some of his cultures in the at low temperature. There was no refrigerator. I am not aware how they were keeping at little low temperature. So he forgot and he left those flask over the bench. Okay, and when he returned, he continued his experiment. Okay, and he thought that okay, this bacteria is still alive. Okay, and then he started his experiment. He inoculated the chicken with those bacteria which is left out over the bench, and then he found out that these chickens are not developing any diarrhea or any disease. So what he thought, okay, something wrong is there. So then he inoculated fresh bacteria, okay, this cholera bacillus, to those chicken in order to develop the disease. But interestingly, they don't develop a disease. So from that point, the concept of attenuation came up. Okay, attenuation means inactivation, and this inactivation result to the protection from virulent pathogen. Okay, so after that he performed several work. So you can see that there he worked on Bacillus anthracis. Okay, Just for your note, Bacillus anthracis was a very dangerous, still it is a very dangerous pathogen. And I don't know if you look at little early history or few or maybe 20-30 years back, then this bacillus was used as a biochemical weapon. Okay, probably you may remember the World Trade Center thing in US. Okay, so at that time, after that, this terrorist used to send the spores of this bacteria, and this bacteria can be you can make a stable form, and this bacteria, when it will infect and cause disease, by that time it is a very short duration and you cannot detect, okay, this disease. So this Bacillus anthracis is used as a biochemical weapon, and it's not good. Okay, so he basically showed that sheep which receive the attenuated anthracis, they are protected from the Bacillus anthracis infection. Okay, so that was his very important work. Beside this, he also worked with rabies, and he made this vaccine. And for his all this work which he made during that time, he is now in current literature, he is considered as a father of immunology. However, not I means the several scientific community, the immunologists, they consider that at that time Robert Koch also did a lot of work in defense system. So ideally both should be the father of immunology. Okay, but these are the debates, and there are some pros and cons and all those things. So we are not here to resolve this thing, just I am highlighting that point, what the other immunologists think about the father of immunology. Okay, now I will talk about the Koch postulate. So Robert Koch work. So Robert Koch gave the Koch postulate in 1875, and basically his model was a rabbit, and he used the the pathogen as a anthracis. Okay, as you have seen in previous slide. So what he has done, he made a one very simple experiment. Now it looks very simple or trivial, but at that time that was a great science. So what he did, he inoculated the ear of rabbit, healthy rabbit, from the blood which he got it from the rabbit which died by anthrax. Okay. So when he did, then this rabbit developed the disease or the same sign and symptom. Okay, and once this rabbit developed a full blown disease, he took out this his lymph node. Okay, and then he inoculated another rabbit, and that also developed the disease. Okay, so basically he gave the concept of infection. Okay, and this we also call it as a Koch postulate, and Koch postulate or germ theory, all these things we can call it. So this postulate is, as you can see in this slide, the microorganism must be found in diseased but not in healthy individual. This is the first postulate. Second is the microorganism must be cultured from the diseased individual. Okay, and the third one is inoculation of healthy individual with the cultured microorganism must recapitulate the disease. And the fourth is the microorganism must be re-isolated from the inoculated diseased individual and matched to the original microorganism. So this is a germ theory or Koch postulate. Now it is very well known. Probably you have learned this Koch postulate earlier. Okay, so after that Koch also worked on variety of field, and he basically the discoverer of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Okay, and at that time tuberculosis we call it as a white death. Okay, so he discovered Mycobacterium tuberculosis. He is a discoverer of tuberculin test, which is very powerful technique to test the tuberculosis or Mycobacterium tuberculosis infection in the individual, and it is a diagnostic, right? So Robert Koch made a lot of contribution, and he basically did his work, and along with this he has also developed some microbiology techniques, okay, like culturing and all those things. So his work is also a lot. So finally I would like to just sum up the birth of immunology. Basically it started with all this smallpox which caused a pandemic all over the world, which kills millions of people through ages, and then this disease was a kind of treated by a technique known as variolation, and variolation is inoculation of a smallpox from diseased patient to the healthy patient in a controlled manner in order to protect. Okay, and this was there was an Indian way, there was a Chinese way. You have I have explained you, and finally this this was fully eradicated or eradicated by the work of Edward Jenner by using the cowpox. Now in modern time we call it as a vaccinia virus, okay, by inoculating the vaccinia virus. So this is all about this first part of history. I will take few more session about the history, and towards end I will also talk about pandemic, how this pandemic thing came in picture, and what is quarantine, how this concept of quarantine came. Okay, and I will also talk about some key contribution in immunology, and those contribution also received the Nobel Prize. Thank you.